Michael Lewis's Flash Boys isn't really a book about finance. At its heart, it's a detective story. It's about a crime that was happening in plain sight, a flaw buried so deep within the modern financial world that almost no one saw it, and it allowed a select few to effectively rig the entire U.S. stock market. This is the story of how a system built for speed was turned into a weapon, and how a small group of outsiders decided to hunt the hunters.
This quote, it drops you right into the middle of the mystery, through the eyes of the story's hero, Brad Katsuyama. He was a trader at the Royal Bank of Canada, a guy known for being straight, for being good at his job. But every single day, when he sat down to trade, something felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. It was like the market itself was cheating him. This is the sound of his confusion, the very beginning of a dawning horror.
So, the whole story starts right here, with this maddening glitch. Brad kept seeing it over and over. It felt like playing a video game where your opponent knew your move the instant you made it and could counter it before it even registered. You see, this wasn't just bad luck. It was way too consistent, too perfect for that. He started to realize that something out there wasn't just moving fast. It was actively preying on his trades.
It's a simple question, right? We all think we know the answer. You see a price you like, you click buy, and you own the stock. Easy. But what Michael Lewis uncovers is that the modern market, which by the way mostly lives inside these anonymous, guarded black boxes in New Jersey, is infinitely more complex. And for Brad Katsuyama, that complexity was being used as a hiding place for a predator.
So here's the scene. Imagine Brad gathering his own tech guys to prove he wasn't crazy. He'd point to his screens and say, okay, watch this. I'm going to buy 100,000 shares of Amgen. You can see them, right? They're right there, offered at this price. And the liquidity was plain as day, spread out across a dozen different public exchanges. 10,000 shares here, 30,000 there. The shares were just waiting.
And then he'd do this little bit of theater. He'd hover his finger over the enter key, and he'd count out loud. 1, 2, see? Nothing's happening. 3, 4. The offers would just sit there on the screen totally stable. The market was calm. But the second he actually pushed the button, the very instant he committed to the trade,
boom, gone. Every single one of them vanished. And then, almost as an insult, the price would tick up, just enough to cost his clients and his firm real money. It was as if someone knew what he was about to do before his order could even get where it was going. The market wasn't just fast anymore. It felt clairvoyant.
So Brad finally understood. This wasn't some technical glitch, it was a hunt, and he was the prey. So what did he do? He put together this incredible team, specialists, outsiders, tech geeks, puzzle solvers, to figure out who or what was hunting him. They decided it was time to flip the script and hunt the predator themselves.
Now, here's the crucial part. This is the genius of their approach. They didn't treat this as a finance problem. They treated it as a physics problem. They got their team together, they ran these carefully controlled experiments, and they started literally mapping the physical wiring of Wall Street, tracing the actual physical path an order takes from a computer in Manhattan to an exchange server in New Jersey.
And that led them to their core discovery. The secret wasn't in the code, it was in the geography. The ultimate advantage in this new market wasn't about having a faster computer, it was about being physically closer to the exchange's computer. This whole high-tech war was really just a race of microseconds, playing out over miles and miles of actual fiber optic cable. And if you want to understand just how absurd this arms race got, you just have to look at this one company, Spread Networks. They spent $300 million to lay a new fiber optic cable from Chicago to New Jersey. And to make it as fast as possible, they made it perfectly straight. They literally rock-sawed through mountains and bored under rivers, all to shave 3 milliseconds off the round-trip time of a trade. 3 1,000ths of a second. That's the world Brad had just stumbled into. So once they understood the physics of it all, they could finally see the crime for what it was. It was a heist, pure and simple, being pulled off thousands of times a second. It was a systematic exploitation of the market's own plumbing, and it all relied on one single advantage, being faster than everybody else. The technical name for this is electronic front-running. And look, this isn't the old-school version where some guy in a trading pit overhears a big order and buys a few shares for himself. No. This was totally automated, completely predatory, and it was built right into the very structure of the modern market.
Okay, so here's exactly how the scam worked. Let's say you send a buy order from your computer. That order is headed for all 13 public stock exchanges at once. But because of basic physics, the speed of light, it's going to hit the exchange that's physically closest to you first. Well, the high-frequency trading firms, they have their servers in the same building as that exchange. They see your order arrive. Their algorithms instantly know what you're trying to do, and they race ahead of your order to all the other exchanges, buying up the very shares you wanted just milliseconds before you can get them. And then, they turn right around and sell those exact same shares back to you at a slightly higher price.
In all those tiny little markups, that little skim off the top of millions of trades every day, well, one industry consultant put a number on it. The estimated annual profit from these strategies was as high as $20 billion. Think about that. It was basically a hidden tax on every single investor, from the biggest pension funds all the way down to anyone with a 401k or a Robinhood account.
So what do you do? What do you do when you find out the whole game is rigged? You could complain, you could just quit, or if you're Brad Katsuyama and his team, you decide to build a better game. And their solution? It was brilliantly counterintuitive.
You see, for years, the entire industry was stuck on one idea. Speed is everything. The only way to win was to get faster. That's why people were spending hundreds of millions on straighter cables and microwave towers.
But Brad's team realized that was a fool's errand. You can't win an arms race against people who are willing to spend billions. So they asked a totally different question. What if the solution wasn't to be faster? What if you had to be smarter? What if the answer was to actually be slower?
And that question led to the creation of IEX, the Investors Exchange. And its goal was nothing short of radical in that world. It wasn't designed to be the fastest market. It was designed to be the fairest market. It was built from the ground up with one goal in mind, to make the predator's advantage totally useless.
And their solution is just so brilliant, so simple, it's almost poetic. They took 38 miles of fiber optic cable and coiled it up inside a box. That's it. Every single order that comes to IEX, doesn't matter if you're a high-frequency trader next door or a regular investor across the country, every order has to travel through this coil. It slows every single order down by just 350 microseconds. Now that's totally imperceptible to a human, but for a trading algorithm, it's an eternity. The speed bump guarantees that predatory messages can't arrive before the orders they're trying to exploit. It makes front-running physically impossible.
So why does this story, a story about microseconds and fiber optics, still matter so much? Because when you peel it all back, it was never really about the technology. It's a story about trust, about complexity, and it asks a really fundamental question. What is a market even for?
The truth is, the US stock market had become a complete black box. Even the experts couldn't tell you for sure what happened when you clicked buy. And that kind of complexity, it just destroys confidence. It's a really telling fact that in the years after the 2008 financial crisis, even while a massive bull market was going on, the number of American families who owned stocks actually went down. People felt in their gut that the game was rigged against them, and it turns out they were right.
And the story of Flash Boys really leaves us with some powerful ideas to think about. It teaches us that any complex system, whether it's in finance or in tech or anywhere else, can be exploited in these subtle, almost invisible ways. It shows us that maybe the most powerful thing you can do is just to stop and ask, why? Why does it work this way? It also proves that sometimes the most elegant solution is way simpler than the problem it's trying to solve. But I think most importantly, it's this powerful testament to the idea that a few determined people really can take on a broken system and change it for the better.
This quote, for me, really gets to the emotional heart of the entire book. It's that moment of realization for Brad Katsuyama, when it dawns on him that no one is coming to save the day. The regulators, they didn't really understand the problem. The big banks were secretly profiting from it. The system was not going to fix itself. He understood that if he, the one person who had seen the rot up close, didn't do something about it, then no one would. It was his problem to solve.
And that, really, is the enduring lesson here. In our relentless global pursuit of systems that are faster, bigger, and more complex, it's so easy to lose sight of the most basic principles. Flash Boys is this incredible reminder that in a world that is completely obsessed with the advantages of speed, sometimes the most profound, the most disruptive innovation of all is simply fairness.